fundamentalist sort of church. I mean, what's their...
He's checking.
How are you coping with that? How do you come to terms with that personally?
To tell you the truth, I haven't really had much of it to deal with, which either means that I'm not making myself heard loud enough, or else Canadians are a tolerant lot and don't really care. I don't know. Even in the States, though, there's been surprisingly little negative reaction to this stuff. I suppose because I'm not high enough profile that I'm really considered a threat by the power types, and yet I'm reaching enough people that I'm reaching the people who are interested or sympathetic,
But when I've interviewed bands or singers like yourself who are believers but working in the mainstream, oftentimes they get bunches of little Christians coming to their gigs after concerts with Bibles wanting to bow heads with them, and so, heavy stuff. Do you get all that kind of thing?
No.
Oh. You must be beyond the pale, basically.
Well, I think so. Actually, I recall having some people of that ilk come backstage at one or two shows, and getting into big arguments over the fact that I was smoking and that sort of thing. It was kind of
where were you
never quite got down to essentials.
Where were you smoking from?
Yeah, from the feet, from the hot music. You know what I mean?
Okay, gentleman in the pink tie.
I'm a rock guitarist, and I'd like to branch out into jazz, the kind of music you play, the Chet Atkins, stuff like that. Can you give me some advice, records to listen to, and how to sort of achieve that sort of stuff?
Okay, well, if you're not, are you playing with your fingers, like any finger style in that? I mean the right hand. Yeah. Yeah. Just so we keep that clear. Well, that's the people that I got most from in terms of finger picking were the old blues guitarists, Mississippi John Hurt, Vance Lipscomb. If you go to blues record stores, they'll have reissues of that kind of stuff. A guy named Blind Willie Johnson did some really nice slide guitar. And Lonnie Johnson, there's a lot of Johnsons out there. But Lonnie Johnson's old records from the 30s, because there are some later ones where he played electric guitar that aren't nearly as good, but the ones from the 30s are really great.
I'll just tell you the story, right? Phil Keaggy, right? He played here on Friday night on the main stage. Have you ever heard of him?
Yeah.
Right. Serious guitarist anyway, but he's got half a finger. And Eddie Van Halen apparently said something like, in an interview, he's the greatest guitarist in the world or something, but Phil Keaggy last night said, "You were incredible."
Okay. I got a double question. The first is quite simple. When are you going to come back to Germany?
In about a week and a half.
For a tour? No. Not for
No,
a tour?
just for there's a big commie youth festival in Duisburg.
Well, another one.
But yeah, they have all the time there. Anyway, we're doing that, and then that's it for now. There was originally going to be a tour, but it didn't work out.
And the second part is, in Germany there's been a lot of public relation for a project in Nicaragua. It's called La Casa de los Tres Mundos. Have you heard of it?
No, I haven't.
It's a cultural project, and it's done by Ernesto Cardinal and a German actor called Dietmar Schönherr.
Uh-huh.
And it's a big house where artists and poets and musicians shall meet and shall work together and to achieve some kind of community between the three worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And it's located in Granada in Nicaragua.
Oh yeah.
And I wonder if you're interested in stuff like that.
It sounds pretty good to me. Yeah, I hadn't heard of it before now, but it's the kind of thing that could be very, very useful. Not only from the point of view of helping Nicaragua survive, but for giving us a chance to learn something from them too, which is at least half of the picture.
When were you last in Central America?
In early '86, I was down in Nicaragua for a couple of weeks. That was the third visit to the area. I'd been in Honduras before that, and then the original trip to Nicaragua in '83.
A fact-finding tour, as they call them.
Well, in '86 for me it was it was my own personal fact-finding tour. I just went. I got some cooperation from the Nicaraguan embassy in Canada and made some contacts, and I had friends down there to begin with, so I just traveled around, spent most of the time on the Atlantic coast, which is if anybody knows anything about Nicaragua, the country's kind of divided in half, roughly, between the Spanish side, which is much more populous, the Pacific side of the country, which was a former Spanish colony, and the Atlantic side, which used to be a British colony, and is populated largely with native and black people, and has very much a Caribbean culture with the sort of Spanish mixed in with it. It's quite a nice atmosphere.
Okay. Yeah.
On the Stealing Fire album, hello.
Oh, there you are. Okay. Good.
On the Stealing Fire album, I think it's the track Nicaragua, you talk about a group of women that you meet, and then you go on to sing, and you were singing last night, they don't believe that I'll ever send them the pictures I took.
I can hear this one coming. Yeah.
It bugs me every time I hear the album, and I need to know, did you actually send the pictures?
Eventually, yeah.
Gentleman in the green cap.
On reflection, Bruce, are you glad you didn't have a rocket launcher?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
Aside from the fact that I probably would have blown my own head off with it before it got anywhere near anybody else's, I don't really think that's the best solution or anything. It's just what seemed to me important about letting people hear the song that contains those sentiments, you know, was that it's just so easy for us to sit in countries like this and in situations like this and say, well, yeah, you know, you shouldn't resort to violence. And it's basically true. But when all the peacemakers are dead and your kids are still dying, what are you going to do, you know? There's a point where it just seems to appear to be the only recourse for the people in the situation. And that's the tragedy, you know. The thing is that we got to somehow come up with other options so that that isn't the only thing that appears to be the course.
Are you a pacifist?
No, I don't think so. I think given the right, well, certainly that situation suggested to me that I would be prepared to fight in certain circumstances, and I go around, you know, I don't really think about it that much, but I don't think I'm a pacifist, no. But I also don't think that violence offers anything but more violence in the long run. I mean, it should be avoided as much as possible.
Okay. Yeah, gentleman just in front of the previous gentleman. Gentleman.
Also sort of a two-part question. When you look at situations like Guatemala, Nicaragua, Latin America, situations which, humanly speaking, seem so desperate consistently, how do you keep from getting bitter and just feeling despair, frustration? And do you find any help in that respect from Christian community or from a network of friends?
Well, I get a lot of help from a lot of sources, but really the most important of those sources is the people in those situations themselves, who, in my experience, have had tremendous spirit. It seems to me that, and whether it's something about those people, I suspect not. I think it may be that when we get driven into the furthest extremes, there's something good that comes out sometimes, you know, and those people, the people I've met in refugee camps and other situations of desperation have shown an incredible spirit that really makes the idea of going around down about it seem like the grossest sort of indulgence, of self-indulgence. You know? There's a tremendous energy there and a willingness to just make the best of every situation that it would be very sad for us to subvert by getting discouraged, you know.
Yes, Bruce, I was going to ask you a question. With your character and your style of music and your content, what biblical character do you think would sing your music today?
Any takers?
Let me think. I gotta. I got to think about this for a while now. This may take a while.
Okay, do you want to come back to that?
No, because then I won't be able to think about it.
Okay.
Maybe somebody like Cain, you know. I mean, I don't really know. I think of Jonah, maybe. You know, I mean, if I was going to put myself in the most positive light, I'd be Jonah, because he was the guy that kept telling God to screw off and leave him alone, and kept on wanting to argue all the time, you know, and got kicked around for it, and that's probably the closest to my experience. I don't know.
Okay, Graham.
As a minister of the church, yet who shares the sort of callings and concerns and things that are so much in your music, what I'm frightened of is that we're going to see some Christians catching on that these things are at the heart of their spirituality, and yet totally alienated from anything that looks recognizably like a church. And my sense of calling is that the church has got to be about the sort of things that you and others are about. And if you like, from the other side of the fence, is there anything you can say to us who are trying to see that the spiritual base is deeper and that the institution isn't a contradiction to half the things that Jesus seemed to be talking about?
Boy, it's pretty hard to make an institution anything but an institution. I guess what that seems to mean is that the more spontaneous the interaction between the church and the people who are potential church goers is, and the better off everybody will be. I mean, it's been, many things have been tried. You know, churches tried having coffee houses in the basement and all that sort of thing, and with limited success. Sometimes it worked out, sometimes it didn't. What worked for me about the church, and this is only me because I know lots of people who don't share my particular love for ceremony, but I really like taking part in the traditional Church of England service. But not everybody does, and I don't really know, what to offer those other people. I mean, I think the point to make is that every situation is potentially an act of worship, and should be treated that way. And if we think about things that way, then, I don't know whether churches are important or not. Maybe they are, but the people like you who are trying to work through them are the important part of it anyway. It's not the buildings and it's not the organization. It's committed people, and it's a funny kind of dynamic. It's like the universe expanding and contracting or something, where you get people. There's a burst of energy that starts a lot of people thinking, and they find each other, and then they become an organization, and the energy dissipates until another new burst comes along. So in a way, in some ways a non-issue because I have a certain faith that there will always be a replacement for that dissipated energy. But at the same time, we have to be aware that there are churches who are becoming increasingly powerful, who are not really offering a very positive message, and I suppose we have to think about somehow offering an alternative to that as well, which is something that an organization can deal with. And I think perhaps a lot of people are thinking about that. I mean, what I'm thinking about, for those who don't really know the situation in the States especially, but also in Canada, what's come to be known as the Christian right has become very powerful. And these are people who, many of whom are really sincere and, maybe right in some way, but there's a tendency to confuse the ideals of Christianity with the ideology of the American state. And that seems to me a terribly destructive thing, both spiritually and politically and just physically for the rest of us, because surely history has shown us lots of examples of what happens when you start trying to legislate beliefs and forcing people to think the way you do and so on. And so that, I think, is very much in need of resistance.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, gentleman right behind you. Yeah, I can't.
Yeah,
women,
it
raise
seems
your
to be.
hands or something. I can't see any hands. Give me hands, people. Have we got any women who'd like to ask a question? Here we go.
It's all right. I was wondering about that myself. I can see lots of you out there, but
Anybody else who's got questions, just get your hands up. That's it. That's better. Okay, right. After that, we'll come down here.
Actually, this isn't so much of a question as sort of giving you some reassurance, because I was reading the article that was in the Greenbelt book on your interview where you said that you didn't feel like God was speaking to you very much anymore. And last night when I was listening to your concert, I just had God come down to me and I just had to tell you that you just have to be patient. And sometimes when we see somebody that's famous and up on stage, we forget about the person behind, and we just need to take the time to say, okay, Lord, listen, I'm here and I'm open to you, and I think that you'll feel him again. Does that help?
yeah.
I think that's
Thank
a good
you.
thing to say.
Well said. That's great.
And that's the second person who this morning who said something like that. Somebody else told me the same thing earlier on, that they felt God was close to them when you did your music last night. Okay?
Can we have some of your testimony, how you became a Christian?
It's pretty boring, actually.
Listen, Bruce, just make it exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, right, yeah.
He used to be a pimp.
Yeah. A pimp and a pusher as well. And before that, I was prime minister. Yeah, that's right. I don't, there's not really a dramatic moment that I can point to with it that at which I was converted, you know. I went through a lot of different, very superficial explorations of things. From when I was in high school on, I was sort of interested in the fact that there was something spiritual out there, and that there was obviously more to life than just the physical. But I didn't really know what it was. My parents are agnostics, and I'd grown up with the Christian symbolism around me, but nothing much more than that. And I sort of flirted with Buddhism for a while, got reasonably involved in the occult, especially the tarot and some other of the less overtly awful aspects of that. And eventually, all of it seemed rather hollow. Although there was really something there. I mean, I had experiences with people and with things, presences and that sort of thing that seemed not always inimical, but certainly not God necessarily. And eventually, I sort of drifted away from that. Started reading things. Somebody introduced me to C.S. Lewis's children's books, and my wife, or the woman who was later to become my wife, introduced me to a way of approaching the Bible that made it seem other than this sort of chronicle of horrors that I'd thought of it as all along. You know, I mean, you sort of, when you're a kid, you always, especially when you're a teenage boy, you look in any book for all the dirty parts, you know, and all the violent parts. So we'd sort of go through the Bible going, oh, look what it says here. You know, look what they did here and look what they did there, you know, and so-and-so sells his daughter to protect so-and-so, you know, and this sort of thing, and it goes on. And that's what I knew of the Bible, and then, you know, it was pointed out to me that there were other more valuable things in there and other perspectives. And that was really the beginning of it. Then I started reading more and thinking about it, and I reached a point about 74. There were a lot of personal crises and little proddings in there too, you know. When I got married, actually, was probably a really major point. I think that was the thing that decided for me that I should head in the direction of Christianity, because at the altar there was this sense of a presence that I could only assume was Christ, because I was in a Christian church, and there was this incredibly warm benign presence there. And I thought, oh, I better look into this more closely. And it took another 4 years, but eventually I reached the point where I was a Christian in everything but name, and was, as a result of some more prodding, made the commitment to Christ. They'll turn you on there. You're on now, probably.
So you do love Jesus, and you have him living inside you?
Well, I hope so. Yeah. Sometimes he kind of hides on me, but yeah, I believe he's there.
Let me just say I can see him. Oh, have you got a dress on? Okay. Okay, it's all right. You can. And then right to the back, please.
It seems to me that a sort of difficulty with Christians is that whilst on one side Paul tells us to respect authorities, on the other we have a duty to oppose authorities that are obviously corrupt and wrong. And I think Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who had great sort of troubles trying to decide whether it was right to oppose Hitler and things like that. I wonder if you have any sort of thoughts on this, because I think it is a difficult problem about the contradiction between opposing evil and what the respect for authorities.
Well, I think it's possible to have a general respect for authorities and still ask a lot of questions, for one thing. I think I mean, before you have to worry about respect for authority and Christian solidarity and all that sort of stuff, you have to worry about love. And that's the prime concern. What does love dictate? For me, that's what I always hope will be the deciding factor. It's not always the case, but if you see that the authority that you're in some ways obliged to respect is abusing that respect, or is using your support of that authority to do something nasty to somebody else, then I think it's necessary, obviously, to act according to love. And love doesn't say that you go around doing nasty things or supporting those who do nasty things. So I mean, it's a very complicated question, because then what's nasty and what's necessary, all that sort of stuff comes into it. But I think as long as you're looking at things from what you can perceive to be the most loving viewpoint, then there'll be some guidance there.
Okay. Lady at the back. You got the microphone? Oh, can you just pass the lady first?
It's a gentleman, thank you.
Oh, okay.
Is that okay? I'd like to ask a simple question. How long do you think you'll carry on making records for?
Well, I'm not eligible for the old age pension yet for a while, so probably at least till then. I don't really know. I don't make plans more than one record in advance. I've got a contract that says something, but I can't remember what it is.
Okay. Please.
Bruce, I'd like to ask if, when you travel and perform outside the North American context, whether you perform mainly within an overtly Christian context, such as Greenbelt, or whether you play to more general audiences.
Sorry, overtly Christian context, such as Greenbelt? Okay, carry on.
Is that clear? And in the light of that, have you found differences in response from North Americans generally and Europeans?
Okay, most of my work is before audiences that are not overtly Christian and may not be Christian at all. That varies from place to place and so on, but I don't make a point particularly of working only in a Christian context, and in fact, that hardly ever happens. There are differences in the audiences between North America and Europe, certainly, and the same kinds of differences exist with Japanese audiences and so on. People, I mean, there's a kind of common element, obviously, when you put a group of people together, but there are differences according to what you're used to, and people in Europe generally are much more politically aware and that reflects itself on what kind of songs they like to hear and how they respond to the different songs, that sort of thing. People in North America are used to being spoon-fed to a much greater degree, and kind of just want everything to be done for them. You know, that varies even between the States and Canada. American audiences are actually more outgoing and more responsive than Canadian audiences tend to be, but you don't get the feeling that they're really listening to the details the same way either. So it's always a trade-off. It's just mostly what happens to me when I get in front of an audience is that there's a feeling that you have to relate to right away. Otherwise, you're dealing in sort of generalities anyway.
To your left, that's right.
I'm fascinated by the process of songwriting, and I'm fascinated too that no two people write songs in the same ways. Could you give me an idea of how you construct songs, where you write, when you write, how things come together?
I find really obscure novelists and copy their work. I write words first most of the time. I carry a notebook around and I write down ideas as they come to me, and then try to make songs out of them, basically. Sometimes the ideas are nothing more than a single visual image that may suggest other things, or it may be a situation that I run across, either directly in the course of travels or vicariously through a book or something. After that, it's a question of trying to fit music to it. Most people that I know who write songs go the other way. They start with the music and get a nice tune and then fit words to it. But I don't have any luck with that approach at all. I find it easier to bend the music to fit the words. But
do you ever you write songs because you're in a certain place at a certain time and you're thinking about certain things in a certain way? Do you ever later, when you progress or move on or change your mind, drop songs from your repertoire, or a variation on that? I remember somebody saying, it was a gentleman at the back, Steve Shaw, one time he'd heard you play Joy Will Find a Way, I don't know what this means, in a minor key. Does that mean anything? Oh, there you go, he was wrong about that, forget that.
yeah. I think so. To the best of my recollection, unless I was really drunk. I don't know. Yeah.
That's right. Steve was probably really drunk, yeah.
Yes, where are we now?
Oh, so do you drop songs?
Oh,
or
drop songs,
get fed
yeah,
up with songs? Or?
Yeah, sometimes. I don't usually, it's only been a couple of songs that I've actually found I wanted to drop for reasons of ideology, you might say, like because I don't either agree with what they say or because I just don't want to say what they say at this point. But the majority of the old songs tend to just drop by the wayside after a while because there has to be room for new ones in a given show, and there's too many of them to sort of try to keep them all up at once.
Do you ever get embarrassed about anything you've written?
No, not really. I get embarrassed about lots of things I do and say, but by the time a thing gets out on a record, I've had a lot of time to think about it.
Do you ever go home to your house and play your old records?
No, not unless I forget a song and have to relearn it.
Right.
Are there any other musicians who've had a big influence on you?
Can you say that again, louder?
Yeah. Are there any other musicians who've had a big influence on you? And if so, who are they? In other words, what records do you play when you get home?
Oh, you want a little shopping list? I don't really know who to suggest. There's so many people, really. When I first started writing, it was very much under the influence of John Lennon, Bob Dylan, Jagger, and Richard. You know, it was that period, you know, and that's what, all of a sudden there was this thing called songwriting that was happening, and that's when I got interested. But I'm a pretty big fan of Chrissie Hynde, and I don't know, there's just so many people. Grace Jones, I don't know, lots of people do good stuff of all different kinds, you know. I've made a point of listening to a lot of different kinds of ethnic music, so-called, for a couple of years. African music, not only the pop music, but the traditional stuff as well. And Chinese music, Tibetan music. I don't know, there's so much out there, you kind of just have to explore. it would depend on whether there was, I mean, a real answer to your question would depend on sort of why you're asking the question. Like if you were interested in somebody's, in it from a songwriting point of view or a guitar playing point of view or a role model point of view or whatever it was, you know, like it's...
Okay. Yep.
Have you ever considered writing poetry, or do any of your notes or songs end up as poems instead?
Do you ever think, I can't find a tune for this?
Yeah, but so then I just let the band play behind it while I talk, so it's sort of... I've sort of thought it's something that I would love to do someday, but don't really have the nerve to do, put out a book of poems. It's most of what I do, well, virtually all of it, is not intended to stand up on the page. It's intended to be heard with music. And that calls for a certain approach that's really different from what I would use if I were writing for the page. And I have so much respect for so many poets that I don't really have the nerve to get into it, you know. Maybe it'll happen someday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, the extremely attractive lady who's my wife.
This is a real quick question. You mentioned the band. When are you going to bring them with you to Britain?
That's a good question. I saw that. Well, we'll probably do a real tour at sometime in the latter part of 1988. Right now, I don't know when there'll be another album. Well, it's only next year. I mean, this one's almost over, you know, so... Yeah, well... This is the 80s, so everything moves double time, you know, so... Can I
just ask how many Scottish people there are in here? Okay, thank you. Okay, carry on. Yes, Scottish people will be quiet now.
We'll be doing another album sometime in '88 anyway, and there will be a tour to go with that, and hopefully that this European stuff that I'm doing solo now, which as the fact that I'm playing solo has allowed me to come to some places that the band would be too expensive to bring to. Hopefully there's enough groundwork being laid now that we'll be able to come back with the band. So.
How many people play in the band?
It varies, really. The last band had 8 of us, but there have been 4-piece bands, 5-piece bands, 6-piece bands.
So it can be quite expensive touring then?
It can, yeah, in fact it is.
Mm. Okay, the lady with the microphone.
Well, actually, it's more a question for the Greenbelt organisers. I was just wondering why, because Bruce Cockburn seems to be so popular now, why he wasn't put on the main stage.
Okay. Well, I'll answer that. We told you that, but there's always a risk of sacrificing one of your favourite people in front of 20,000 people who want to hear a big loud rock band. If you can't afford to bring the big loud rock band, it's fair, isn't it?
It sounds okay to me.
Yeah.
I really, for what it's worth, I really liked playing in the tent. It's great to play in front of a large audience, but well, I don't know. Maybe it would have worked. There were enough people in the tent that it would have been a really solid core.
I would say, but, as soon as Bruce's people are like organising a tour with the band and Greenbelt can get in on it, we'll do it. But it's a bit expensive to afford on our own, so we could have a collection or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, just sort of, pass the money up.
Yeah.
Put it in a special account. Bring the band to Greenbelt.
We must have some Scottish questions. Any Scottish questions? Yeah, here we go. Can you bring it down here, please? Here we go. This is the lead singer of Big Sur we're coming to now. Yeah, tell us about Bernie's Dream.
Bernie's Dream. Well, it's just really what's related in the song. Bernie is a friend of mine who's also my manager, and we were in a little town on the Italian-Yugoslav border called Gorizia. And this was the first tour of Italy, and things were quite strange. The Red Brigades were being all active, and the fascist counterparts were being active, and it was all very interesting. And we were in this little town the border runs right through the middle of town. The train station is across the street from the hotel, but the train station's in Yugoslavia. And formerly, before the war, it had been in Italy. You know, but the Yugoslavs kind of took it away as penance, you know, as a sort of a penalty for what they'd suffered at the hands of the Italians. And Bernie told me that he had this recurring dream when he was a kid about being a displaced person in a town just like this, you know, and so that seemed like an appropriate image.
Have you heard any rumours of glory lately?
Well, that's a very cute question, isn't it? They're all over the place.
Yeah. Have you seen any this weekend?
That's a loaded question now. He's gone from, see this guy's tricky. He goes from, sets you up with a cute question, gets you all disarmed, and then he comes out with this, you know, what, have I seen it? I'm going to think about that. I don't know. Probably.
After the cute question, the Scottish question.
This is an uncute Scots question. Some of the tunings that you use in your music are quite Celtic. Are you aware of any Celtic roots in your music?
In my music?
This is a
well, I'm aware of having
Scottish question.
I'm aware of having ancestors that come from around Jedburgh. But
around where?
Well, north of London, yes. It's somewhere north of London.
Actually, I'm from Wales.
Yeah. Anyway, well, I've listened to a fair amount of Celtic music, but I haven't really deliberately applied very much of it to my own stuff. The only exception would be that I can think of offhand. Actually, well, two. There's an old song called "My Lady and My Lord" that's on one of the earliest albums, and there's an instrumental on the Circles in the Stream live album called Cader Idris, which is written in Wales, or about Wales anyway. That that's all right. That has a sort of deliberately Celtic feel to it, to parts of it, but other than that, I think it would just be a kind of generalized influence.
Okay, this lady here, please, with the Run the World T-shirt.
You said that you read C.S. Lewis, and I know you've read Charles Williams, but what are some of the other authors that you like to read when you get the chance?
I'm always on the lookout for new ones, you know. I read all of Charles Williams' stuff when I discovered him, because it was his particular vision was so overwhelming and so vividly portrayed, even though he's probably not the greatest writer on earth. But lately I've been getting into a lot of Latin American writers, beginning with Ernesto Cardenal, who's now, of course, the Minister of Culture in Nicaragua, but is a really great poet, especially his older stuff, before he got so tied down with the political thing. The ones, yeah, I mean, all those guys with Latin names in the bookstores, you know, they're all writing interesting stuff. Really, it's hard to, I can never think of names when I'm called upon to.
Okay.
But
This way, please. It's the gentleman with the beard. How much time's left? What's the time?
10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay.
Bruce, in the early days you did an awful lot of instrumentals, almost 2 on every album. They seem to have disappeared. Any reason for that?
Space. You can only fit so much on an album. I haven't really paid that much attention to making up instrumentals, although there have been a couple. But there's been all these words, you know, that I have to do something with, and you can only fit so much stuff on a record, so that tends to take precedence.
Strung together.
Well, thanks. I'm glad
Really
you like them, but there may be another one somewhere down the line.
Okay. Oh, come down here, please. Is there any area the microphone has not visited? Oh, here we go. Here we go.
This guy's been trying for a while here. So.
Well, why don't you come up and ask it here while we're waiting? Oh no, hold on.
Bruce, it's my second time at Greenbelt, and I see it's fairly political, and I think that's kind of like old hat, you know, like the hippie movement and all that kind of thing. And the reason I say that is because I believe that when the Lord stood up in front of Pilate, right, and Pilate asked him, you know, are you a king then?
Yeah.
And he says, man, my kingdom's none of this earth.
Yeah.
And how he subjected himself to the Roman law when the woman was caught in adultery, and his dad writ the law.
Yeah.
And I heard Tony Campolo talk, and he was like really good comedian. But it was really sad to hear him, you know, not expound on things like in Romans when he says subject yourselves to authorities and the like. And I see Jesus coming to be crushed, so the vase gets crushed, the clay pots get crushed to release the power within. And I'm scared of this political type talk because it seems to reek of lack of faith and strength in man's glory rather than what Jesus can do. Like when the lads were on the Red Sea, you said, what can you do against the people coming against them, you know?
Yeah. Let me address this because we'll run out of time. It's a good point and it's an important point. And it seems to me that it's what I read from those things is that it's appropriate for me to offer myself to be crushed. It's appropriate for anyone who believes to offer themselves to be crushed, but you cannot make that offer on behalf of anyone else. And if you see someone else being crushed who hasn't made that offer, you have to do something about that. That's what I was getting at earlier about following what I consider to be the dictates of love. That I mean, it's a very heavy thing. You've got to pray about it a lot to know if you're doing the right thing or not. And it's certainly, you're right to be cautious about all, the tendency for us all to get rhetorical in a political way. I mean, it's easy to talk about, it's easy to feel all fired up with, but it's not as simple as all that. And as vital as and as important as it is to me and hopefully to the rest of us, the first consideration has to be, for a Christian, has to be that spiritual involvement and hopefully understanding. But I think, I mean, the other side of that coin is that if you just sit back and you can be as personally involved, and I mean, my main focus for a long time was that personal involvement between me and the Lord, and what I was interested in exploring that in as deep a way as possible. And it reached a point where it seemed to me the Lord was kind of saying, I think you should turn your head this way now for a while and get out there, I know you love me, now show me that you love them. And I think it's very important to have that grounding in the scriptures and grounding in the deep personal contact with God, but the scriptures have to be informed, or your understanding of the scriptures has to be informed by your experience of what's around you. And if your experience of what's around you includes so much suffering, I think that I personally feel called upon to address that suffering in some way. That doesn't mean that everybody's called upon to do it, but I sure feel that, and I hope that answers your question in some way.
Okay.
It seemed to me that last night in the Big Top everybody was hanging on your words, and I just wondered, it seemed to me you seemed slightly embarrassed, almost overwhelmed by the warmth of the audience, and I wondered, that kind of power you have almost, do you find that ecstatic or terrifying or embarrassing? Because I know that Bono of U2 has the same problem. Knowing
probably to a considerably greater degree, I would think.
Yeah, but I mean, do you find that a problem, or you just find it very reassuring?
Well, it's everything at once. I mean, it was a real surprise, first of all, to be greeted with such warmth by so many people. Here, where the records aren't really that available and so on, people knew the songs, which was a real surprise too. It's the first time I've ever done If I Had a Rocket Launcher as a sing-along. Kind of, it was quite strange, actually, that. But it really felt good. It felt beautiful, and at the same time, of course, it's sort of like, whoa, what do I do now? I mean, it's okay.
Okay.
Hello. Two problems. One is, this might be a little bit out of context because I've been waiting 40 minutes to say this. And the second is it's not really a question, it's more of a statement. I'd just like to say I appreciate your openness and honesty about your doubts and difficulties in your faith. That really helps me. Thanks.
Well, thanks for saying that.
Can we get down here quite quickly? One more and then Bruce will close in prayer.
I'd like to say, I think you've got a very distinctive guitar style. You're probably amongst, the top guitarists in the world, really. And that's quite a distinction for a Christian, because there don't seem to be very many good quality Christian guitarists around. What guitarist do you really like? I mean, I really like Michael Hedges, and you remind me of him too.
I've only heard one or two things by him which I enjoyed, but I don't know his particular music very well. The people, who's a good guitarist? I don't really listen to very many guitarists anymore. I mean, I did at one time when I was sort of trying to absorb everything and learn it all, and then the focus for me now has been much more to do with words and the guitar as a vehicle for words. But, there's another, Phil Keaggy's a pretty good Christian guitarist too, for example. There are a lot of, it depends, it's style, Like I like the guy in the Pretenders a lot. It's one of the other reasons why I'm a Chrissy Hynde fan, is because she's got that great guitar player. And there's just, it depends on what what you're interested in listening to. I still put on Manitas de Plata records, the flamenco stuff sometimes. But I've never really been like a major student of the guitar.
Okay.
In a formal way.
Two really quick ones to close.
Yeah. This is a quick one, yes, Bruce. Do you have any children at all?
I have a daughter who's 11. Her name is Jenny. I'll pass it on.
I was at another gathering of Christian artists about a few weeks ago, and there was a discussion about crossover, and a number of those artists had felt that they were being Christian by leaving an arena that included other secular artists. And you're a perfect person to talk about that, because you've been very encouraging to many of us who want to see our lives integrated across the sacred secular gap.
Yeah. Well, I do want to see that. It seems to me, let me say first of all, okay, that everybody is called in their own way and everybody should do what they're called to do. So, having said that, I think the whole idea of having a, quote, Christian music scene, unquote, stinks. I think it's the kind of thing that's going to happen anyway, just because of the common faith that people have, that people share. But it's really preaching to the converted for so many people, and I meet these musicians, so many musicians who have been operating in the rock scene, and maybe they're reacting to something much heavier than I've experienced, so I don't know what makes them want to get away from that, but it seems to me there's so much of a tendency to kind of go, okay, well now I'll do exactly the same thing, I'll jump around the stage the same way, and I'll sing all the same music, but I'll say Jesus instead of baby. And it's kind of like, so what, it's already being done, it's all been done, it's not very interesting to me, especially. It seems to me, I've said this before, but it seems like the appropriate turn of phrase, that we're, as Christians, we're supposed to be involved in the greatest adventure life can offer, and here are all these people doing the most conservative, safe, boring music possible, and it's like, leave it alone, Aside from the fact that it's become an industry, which is a whole other set of considerations that I haven't really thought about. But there's a certain peril involved in that too. You know, it's become great marketing and all that sort of thing to be a Christian artist, and it's okay up to a point. But I mean, it's certainly okay for people to be able to make a living doing what they think they should be doing. But there's something inherently dangerous about commercializing anything of value, and there can't be anything of greater value than this. So.
Okay. Bruce is going to be wandering around the rest of the day. Say hello, but try not to keep him for 2-hour discussions about his marriage and things like this. And he's going to be playing in Cabaret Nicaragua tonight for half an hour.
Okay. Thanks for listening. Thanks for the questions.
Let's hear it for Bruce Cockburn.